Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named YellowJackets Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama is set in the year 1996, somewhere in the snowy woods. A girl is shown running in panic trying to avoid something and falling into the trap eventually. After her fall, a mysterious masked figure approached her with unknown intentions. The scene then shifts to a high school girls' soccer team called the YellowJackets. The team was on a winning streak, dominating every match. It kept advancing all the way to the national tournament. Meanwhile, in a hormone-smelly bedroom, a boy and a girl are getting intimate. However, it seems nothing much really happens, just some heated tongue wrestling. The boy's name is Jeff, and the girl is Jackie. 2 minutes later, they finish their wrestling session, and Jackie stands in front of a mirror and adjusts her necklace. However, the necklace seems to be the same one from the girl who fell into a trap. Outside, a girl named Shauna is waiting for Jackie. Both of them are members of the YellowJackets. Shauna glances around just in time to see Jeff sneaking out from upstairs. Moments later, Jackie follows him out. In the car, Shauna confronts her, saying they were supposed to stay focused before the national tournament. It turns out that this is their final year of high school. Next year, they'll be off to college. Jackie confides that she wants to lose her virginity before starting college. If she and Jeff lose it to each other, that would mean they're destined to get married. Shauna was surprised to hear that Jeff was also a virgin, because these two have been together since freshman year, and nothing has happened yet. At school, the coach calls Jackie to his office. He asks Jackie if she knows why someone with the worst skills on the team was made captain. It's because Jackie has something the others don't. She's the glue that holds the team together. The coach hints at underlying tensions within the team, and he's counting on Jackie to keep them united. Meanwhile, one of the girls, Tysa, plots to isolate a teammate named Allie, who didn't play well in their last game. But not everyone agrees with her plan. During practice, the head coach is absent, leaving the assistant coach in charge. Standing on the sidelines is a medical helper called Misty. On the field, Tysa goes head-to-head with Allie, clearly targeting her. She seizes an opportunity and delivers a vicious tackle to Allie's leg. Blood splatters everywhere, and you can even glimpse the bone through the wound. Misty rushes over with a piece of torn fabric to stop the bleeding, pressing it against the wound, causing Allie to scream in agony and in a chicken voice. The assistant coach quickly orders Misty to call for an ambulance and have Allie taken to the hospital. The team gathers in the locker room, faces heavy with frustration. Jackie remembers the coach's words and attempts to cheer everyone up, but no one pays her any attention. That evening, there's a party at school. Jackie helps Shauna pick out an outfit, revealing that a boy named Randy seems to have a crush on her, and it's Jeff who told her so. Shauna, unenthusiastic, throws on whatever she can find to cover her charming body. At the party, Shauna watches Jackie and Jeff getting cozy, feeling a mix of anger and jealousy. She glances at Randy, who looks like a total drunk, making her even more frustrated. Spotting Tysa, Shauna can't help but bring up the incident with Allie from earlier that day. The two start arguing, and soon other members of the team gather around, each with their own opinions. Before long, the situation escalates into a chaotic fight. Jackie shouts, pulling everyone apart. As captain, she orders the girls to line up and has each of them say something encouraging to another teammate. Jackie sets the example, and one by one, the others follow. Surprisingly, this approach works. The tension eases and the girls start to make amends. Even Tysa admits that injuring Allie wasn't intentional. With the mood lightened, the party resumes. After the party, Jeff drives Jackie home and then offers Shauna a ride. On the way, Shauna tells Jeff to pull over. As it turns out, the two of them have been sneaking around behind Jackie's back for quite some time. From their conversation, it's clear this isn't their first time hooking up, so Jeff hasn't been a virgin for a while. The next morning, a Brown University acceptance letter arrived for Shauna. She gave it a quick glance before grabbing her luggage and heading out. The YellowJackets were departing for the national tournament today, but little did they know what awaited them wasn't a soccer match. It was a brutal life-and-death game. The head coach even brought along his two sons, Travis and his younger brother, likely hoping they'd learn something by observing. The team boarded a private plane owned by one of the players' families. Knowing that Shauna gets carsick, Jackie gave her a sleeping pill. Jackie said some comforting words, handing Shauna her necklace for protection. Shauna soon drifted into a deep sleep, but when she awoke, she found herself wearing an oxygen mask, with the plane shaking violently around her. She opened the window shade just in time to see the plane nosediving toward a dense forest. The aircraft shattered into pieces upon impact. As a result, many people died, but a few managed to survive. Jackie shook Shauna awake, and together with some others, they escaped through an emergency exit. The crash site was a mess. Suddenly, Misty heard the assistant coach calling out for help. Following the sound, she found him trapped under wreckage, with his leg crushed beyond repair. As the group tried to free him, Misty grabbed an axe and, without hesitation, severed the assistant coach's injured limb. She then used her belt as a makeshift tourniquet. This bold move earned Misty respect, and under her guidance, the group began organizing rescue efforts. As it turned out, she had participated in 2 Red Cross survival courses, which were now proving invaluable. Though the amputation was a success, they needed to keep disinfecting the wound to prevent infection. For now, alcohol was their best option. Everyone turned to the girl named Natalie. She hesitated, saying she had stashed some booze, but she couldn't find her bag now. Eventually, she found a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, which Misty used as a substitute disinfectant. As soon as the alcohol hit the wound, the assistant coach let out a blood-curdling scream and regained consciousness. He cried out loud for his missing leg. Before Misty could explain, Taysa pulled her aside, whispering for her not to tell him the truth just yet since his fragile mind won't be able to take it. Meanwhile, the head coach was nowhere to be found. Travis didn't seem too concerned, but his brother was desperately searching for their father. Natalie tried to comfort Travis, who coldly replied his father tried to put an oxygen mask on one of them, then the hatch blew open and he got thrown out. So now, there's no point looking for him. He's definitely dead as a piece of shit. At that moment, a girl named Laura found her backpack. Excited, she pulled out her teddy bear, only to discover a drop of diabetic blood splattered on it. When she looked up, she saw the head coach's body tangled in the branches above. Without hesitation, Travis climbed up, trying to retrieve his father's greasy body. But as he reached for him, a branch snapped with a sickening crack, and the coach's lifeless form plummeted to the ground. As the group gathered around, someone noticed strange symbols carved into the nearby tree trunk. It resembles a human figure with a line through it and a hook underneath. Let's call it the Hookfoot figure for convenience. That night, the group tallied up the casualties and buried the dead. Afterward, they built a campfire. Shauna reassured everyone that the plane had an emergency transmitter, and so rescue would come soon. Ironically, Allie, who had been injured earlier, now seemed lucky by comparison. Laura, feeling guilty, admitted that it's her fault. Last week, she cursed her piano teacher. Even though she didn't say it out loud, God must have heard her. Her confession made everyone burst into laughter, lightening the grim atmosphere. The group started sharing embarrassing stories to lift their spirits. Later, Misty secretly approached the assistant coach. When he woke up, she told him she cut off his leg but saved his life. She then pulled out the same axe, now red hot, and pressed it against his wound to cauterize it. The assistant coach let out a horrific scream before falling unconscious again. Misty, unable to sleep, got up to dump her wastewater in the woods. As she wandered, she overheard someone saying without Misty, they'd all be dead by now. Smiling with pride, she reflected on how she used to be the school's ugly duckling, always messing things up. But now, she was finally having her moment to shine. While in the woods, she spotted a flashing red light. Curious, she approached it and realized it was one of the plane's black boxes with an active emergency transmitter. After a brief hesitation, Misty picked up a large rock and smashed the transmitter, yanking out the power cord. The signal went dead. She smiled to herself. She liked it here and didn't want rescuers to find them. For 3 days straight, everyone was puzzled, wondering why the rescue team hadn't arrived yet. Their food and water would only last 2 more days. Jackie's leg also started developing a strange rash. Suddenly, Taysa ran over, pointing to the distance where a lake was. She said they could replenish their water supply. It's about 6 to 8 kilometers away, but if they go, they might not make it back. Jackie insisted they couldn't leave, saying the rescue team would come to the crash site. If they move, they won't find them. With differing opinions, they decided to put it to a vote. It ended in a tie, until Shauna voted in favor of Taysa's plan. Before they left, the girl, Van, dismantled the compass from the plane, and Shauna left a message on the wreckage saying they had gone to the lake. The group packed their belongings and set off toward the lake. On the way, they stumbled upon a bear with its stomach hollowed out, likely the victim of a wolf attack. Taysa couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching them from the shadows. After a grueling trek, they finally reached the lake. The girls, exhausted, shed their coats and dove into the water, reveling in the moment. Even Travis stripped down naked, swimming shamelessly. One girl remarked that he looked pretty sexy, licking her lips. Natalie couldn't stop staring at him either. Suddenly, one of them spotted something reflecting light from a distant hillside. The group scrambled ashore and headed toward it, only to discover an abandoned cabin. It looked like no one had lived there for years. Jackie, overwhelmed, sat by the door and burst into tears. Shauna noticed and brought her a blanket, apologizing for her vote earlier, saying that she didn't mean to make things difficult for her. She just went with her gut and didn't want to die of thirst. The two reconciled, rekindling their friendship. Shauna added, "It's tough now, but at least they were alive, and that's what matters." Meanwhile, the assistant coach's wound began attracting swarms of wasps. While trying to shoo them away, he accidentally struck his wound, causing him to scream in pain. His outburst turned into a full-blown rage, and in the chaos, he even hit Misty hard enough to make her mouth bleed and her nose run. But Misty just hugged him tightly, whispering for him not to be afraid since he still got one good leg for walking. This scene triggered a memory for Taisa, something from her childhood. One day, her grandmother stared into a mirror and suddenly asked who he was, telling him not to come any closer. When Taisa asked what she saw, her grandmother replied, "It's a man with no eyes and he's here to take hers." Moments later, her grandmother let out a final scream and passed away. At the funeral, Taisa pried her grandmother's eyes open and found them completely white. Taisa wondered if her soul was really taken by something invisible. Back in the forest, Taisa heard noises from the cabin's attic late at night. She climbed up to investigate and found a girl named Lottie curled up in a corner, terrified by something. When Taisa glanced around, she saw a hook-foot figure carved into the floor, followed by a horrifying corpse. After the incident, they decided to bury it overnight. Unsurprisingly, the body likely belonged to the cabin's previous owner, possibly a hunter. But Lottie, who had some psychological issues, kept glancing toward the attic, sensing that something bad was about to happen. The next morning, Travis grabbed a shotgun to hunt squirrels, but Van urgently tried to stop him. Travis brushed her off, saying, "What's the point of having a gun if he didn't use it?" He aimed at a squirrel and fired, but missed. The assistant coach took the gun back, saying he used to hunt with his dad, but now even going to the bathroom is a struggle. Hunting's out of the question. He announced his plan to start survival training for the group. Hearing this, Natalie drifted into her own memories. She recalled bringing a boy named Kevin over to her house one day. Her mother was downstairs, passed out drunk and oblivious. Nothing happened between Natalie and Kevin. They just talked about music and dreams. But Kevin confessed that he liked her. Then, without warning, Natalie's father came home. Kevin had no time to escape through the window. Her father stormed in, demanding an explanation. Natalie pleaded they didn't do anything, but her father wouldn't believe her. He accused her of being a slut and even beat her mother, shouting all she did was sleep all day. Natalie pointed the hunting rifle at her father. When he saw her aiming, he mockingly told her to shoot him. She actually pulled the trigger, but the safety was still on. Strangely, her father then started patiently teaching her how to properly handle the gun. However, the gun accidentally discharged, killing him instantly. Half his face was blown off. Back in the forest, the assistant coach had everyone practice shooting by balancing a coin on the barrel of an unloaded gun. The coin had to stay on after the trigger was pulled to pass the test. Both Travis and Natalie succeeded and were assigned to the hunting team. At a nearby stream, Travis's brother stumbled upon Shauna writing in her journal. He awkwardly tried to say something, and Shauna, thinking he wanted paper, tore out a page for him. After that, the assistant coach organized live fire training. They discovered a stash of ammunition in the cabin, so no one held back. Travis fired off several rounds, hitting most of his shots but missing one. Natalie, on the other hand, nailed every shot, so the assistant coach paired them up for a hunting mission. Meanwhile, some of the group tried to gather wild fruits but couldn't find anything edible. Lottie discovered more hookfoot carvings on a tree, but before she could inspect them, someone called out. It turns out they'd found a small plane. Laura started pressing buttons randomly and accidentally turned on the engine, but no one could figure out how to stop it. The plane began to move forward, heading straight for Van. Jackie pushed Van out of the way but got stuck herself. Fortunately, vines tangled in the propeller, stopping the plane just in time. Lottie commented that this forest didn't want it to leave. Travis and Natalie made their way back to the crash site. Natalie asked what he was doing here. Travis started digging, explaining that he wanted to retrieve his father's body since his father was wearing their great-grandfather's ring. When they finally uncovered the body, a horrible stench filled the air. Travis hesitated, unable to bring himself to reach for the ring. Natalie stepped in and did it for him, handing over the ring. This incident softened the tension between the two, and they grew closer without a hormone yoga session. On the way back, they spotted a deer. As Natalie raised her rifle, she thought of her father. She steadied her nerves and took the shot, killing the deer with one clean shot. Everyone was thrilled with their first successful hunt, but now came the question, who would clean the deer? Misty volunteered, but the assistant coach ignored her. In the end, Shauna took the knife and without hesitation slit the deer's throat, indicating that she had some serial killer material. That night, the deer meat smelled amazing, so good I could practically taste it through the screen. After the meal, the group did a little cheerleading routine, but their portable player suddenly broke. Then they heard strange noises coming from the attic. Everyone started speculating about what it could be, but no one dared to go up and check. After some nervous discussion, they decided to sleep instead. The next morning, Misty checked on the assistant coach and noticed something odd. His waist was swollen, almost like a mountain peak. Curious, she touched it lightly, and the assistant coach jolted awake as if electrified. He shouted for her not to touch him and angrily ordered her to leave, leaving Misty feeling deeply hurt. One by one, the girls started getting their periods. With no proper supplies, they used makeshift sanitary pads from cloth and boiled water to sterilize them. The area around the cabin soon became a pool of blood, attracting flies and spreading the scent far and wide. Everyone's cycle seemed to align, except Shauna's. Realizing she might be pregnant with Jeff's baby, Shauna knew she had to hide it. She smeared some deer blood on a cloth to fake her period, but Taysa happened to catch her in the act. Later, Shauna noticed Jackie struggling to cope, so she told Jackie that as the team's captain, Jackie needed to stay strong. She then gave Jackie back the necklace she had gifted her earlier. Taysa and Van, who were both secretly in love with each other, snuck behind the cabin for some hormone therapy. Suddenly, one of the girls burst out screaming, claiming that something had crawled into her back while she was standing by the window, but she couldn't find anything. She wondered aloud if it could be a ghost. Jackie then suggested they play a seance game tonight in the attic. Everyone eagerly agreed. Jackie and Shauna began arranging candles, placing them carefully on the floor of the attic. The floorboards were covered in hook-foot carvings, suggesting that people had once used the space for rituals. The girls placed the candles directly on top of the symbols, ready to summon whatever spirits might be lurking in the shadows. Meanwhile, the hunting team struggled to find anything. Aside from a few squirrels, they hadn't caught much. Travis kept taking bullets to reload Natalie's rifle, telling her to watch him do some magic. One thing led to another, and soon the two started developing feelings for each other. That night, the girls gathered in the attic to hold a seance. They began asking silly questions. Jackie couldn't take it anymore, telling them to be serious for once. A few people downstairs overheard the giggling from above and were equally puzzled. Was something really that funny? Laura found the plane's user manual and started reading it. Misty then asked if the person she likes loves her back. The answer was favorable. Travis's brother, however, chose to ask the worst question imaginable: if they were all going to die here. The answer was a resounding yes. Suddenly, Lottie felt a strange presence and screamed as she glanced at the window. It seemed like something had possessed Lottie. She rambled incoherently, saying, "It's hungry and wants something." Reaching toward Shauna's stomach, Lottie added, "It's already inside her." Then out of nowhere, Lottie started speaking French. Though Jackie and Lottie were in the same French class, Jackie remembered that Lottie's fluency only extended to singing nursery rhymes. Jackie tried translating that, "It wants blood and blood is here." Without warning, Lottie slammed her head into the window. Meanwhile, the assistant coach suddenly coughed up blood. Laura threw a Bible onto Lottie, snapping her out of the trance. Later, the assistant coach confronted Misty, demanding to know why she poisoned his water. Misty replied because she loved him. The assistant coach looked uneasy, wondering if that meant she wanted them to die together. He then turned to confess he really loved her, but they couldn't be together. He's still her teacher, and she's under 18. This has to be their secret. Misty reluctantly agreed, but something felt off. It seemed like the assistant coach was stalling to avoid a possible death by poisoning. Taysa chimed in, claiming Lottie's been acting crazy for a while now, and it has nothing to do with spirits in the attic. To prove it, she headed upstairs to sleep in the attic, with Shauna following out of concern. Both of them were atheists and had nothing to fear. Taysa easily deduced that Shauna was pregnant, but didn't press her on who the father was. Meanwhile, Lottie's hallucinations worsened. The next morning, she spotted a blood-soaked deer in the forest, but kept it to herself. Shauna, on the other hand, kept dreaming about giving birth to a roasted chicken and gnawing on its leg, a sign of hunger, no doubt. That night, Shauna asked Taysa for advice, saying she heard Taysa could stop pregnancy by using the underwire from a bra. She admitted she wanted to try it. She didn't want to carry her best friend's boyfriend's baby to her grave. When Taysa realized the baby was Jackie's boyfriend, Jeff's, she urged her not to do anything reckless. She would head south to look for help. If she found someone, they would be saved. Meanwhile, Natalie and Travis weren't focused on hunting. Instead, they spent most of their time fooling around. The assistant coach secretly handed Travis a stash of condoms, advising him not to waste these. Later that night, Lottie removed a lantern from the wall and snuck out, only to find Taysa eating dirt. The next morning, Taysa woke up and noticed Shauna's bra lying on her bed. Curious, she picked it up and felt inside, only to discover that the underwire was missing. Alarmed, Taysa ran out, asking Lottie if she had seen Shauna. Lottie pointed in a direction, but then asked if she ate dirt last night. Taysa denied it, though she wasn't entirely sure herself. After Taysa left, Lottie approached Laura and asked for spiritual salvation, confessing that she couldn't keep seeing things like this. Laura, thrilled at the chance to share her faith, agreed and led Lottie to the lake, gently placing her in the water. Lottie immediately slipped into a hallucination, finding herself in an underground tunnel. In front of her stood the same deer, leading her toward a circle of lit candles. One candle remained unlit, and when Lottie lit it, the flames flared brightly, snapping her back to reality. Laura was delighted, telling Lottie that she saw the fire and light. That's the Holy Spirit, a sign from the Lord. She congratulated her for being touched by God. Meanwhile, Taysa found Shauna in the middle of attempting to get rid of her pregnancy. Seeing Taysa arrive, Shauna asked for her help. Taysa reluctantly agreed, but as soon as she started, Shauna panicked and told her to stop. She couldn't go through with it. At the same time, Natalie and Travis were talking about their past relationships. To Natalie's surprise, Travis confessed that he was still a virgin. In turn, Natalie openly shared her two past relationships, and the two of them started getting intimate again. Just then, a deer with bloodied antlers dashed past them, the same one Lottie had seen earlier. This confirmed it hadn't just been Lottie's hallucination. After they brought the deer back, something felt off about it. The assistant coach reassured everyone that it was nothing unusual, and it's normal for deer to shed their antlers with the changing seasons. Shauna pulled out a knife and skillfully opened the deer's belly, only to find it crawling with maggots. It was clear the deer was inedible. Taysa, frustrated, declared they couldn't just sit around waiting for rescue. It's getting colder every day, and if they stay here, they'll die. She then asked who would head south with her tomorrow to try their luck. Only a few people volunteered, but Taysa was determined to leave. The next morning, Taysa cut her hair short to prepare for the journey. Before they left, Lottie handed Van a deer bone as a protective charm. She explained that she had dreamt again, this time of red smoke and a river of blood. But why only give the charm to Van? It seemed like Lottie had seen something more in her dream, but she didn't say what. The group heading south consisted of Taysa, Van, Misty, and two other sidekick characters. After they left, Jackie approached Shauna. It was obvious to Jackie that Shauna was hiding something. Shauna eventually confessed she was pregnant but lied, claiming the father was Randy, the boy from who drunkenly burped during the party. She fabricated a story, saying that after the party, instead of going straight home, she and Randy hooked up. But Jackie wasn't convinced, saying Randy passed out drunk in the pool. Someone called her to pick him up, and she drove him home herself that night. Caught off guard, Shauna awkwardly blamed alcohol for her memory lapse. Meanwhile, Natalie and Travis continued their fling until Travis suddenly experienced some performance issues, which left both of them frustrated and tense. As Taysa's group traveled further south, they came across a red stream, and their compass began to spin wildly. It wasn't entirely surprising, though. Iron deposits in the water could have interfered with the magnetic field. Van suddenly remembered Lottie's dream, wondering if this was the river of blood she was talking about. That night, Taysa took the first watch while the others slept. Back at the cabin, Shauna caught Travis's brother rummaging through her bag. He hastily explained he was just looking for the knife to carve something. Shauna pulled the knife from her front pocket and handed it to him, but then she hid her journal in the ceiling beams. She suspected that his real goal was to steal her journal. Later that night, Shauna discovered a small wooden dog figurine carved into the windowsill, and beside it was the knife she had given to Travis's brother. However, her journal had vanished and somehow ended up in Jackie's hands. From Jackie's expression, it was clear that she had read Shauna's secret, specifically that her boyfriend Jeff was the baby's father. Their friendship seemed on the verge of collapsing. Meanwhile, on the southbound journey, Taysa suddenly woke up to find herself perched in the branches of a tree holding both the deer bone and a flare gun. Down below, she heard a series of terrifying screams. Taisa jumped from the tree and discovered a pack of wolves attacking the group. One of the wolves was dragging Van by the leg. Without hesitating, Taisa fired the flare gun at the wolf, and the burst of fire scattered the rest of the wolf pack to run away for their shitty lives. Unfortunately, it was too late. Half of Van's face had been ripped off, and she was already dead like a piece of greasy soup. The scouting group's mission had taken a disastrous turn. The group decided to cremate Van, but just as the smell of roasting meat began wafting through the air, Van suddenly opened her eyes, seeming to complain that they took the food without sharing with her. The group froze in shock, quickly pulling Van off the makeshift pyre. It turns out she wasn't dead after all. Back at the cabin, Natalie kept nagging Travis to go hunting again. Ever since Travis's unexpected failure in the hormone yoga session, he'd been too embarrassed to face her, and their relationship had grown cold. Frustrated, Natalie decided to head out alone. On her way, she came across the assistant coach reading by the stream, and they started chatting. Naturally, their conversation drifted to Misty. Natalie said she knew he didn't like Misty because he liked men only. The assistant coach was taken aback. He'd kept that secret hidden for so long, yet Natalie had figured it out instantly. Natalie continued, saying it's simple for her to figure it out because he lived with all these young girls day and night, and he never once glanced at their boobs. The assistant coach, resigned, admitted he's gay and once had a boyfriend. When the assistant coach heard about Travis's hormone failures, he analyzed the situation from a technical standpoint, saying there's nothing physically wrong with the guy. It's probably just nerves. He'll be fine after a few more tries. Meanwhile, Travis was fishing by the lake when Jackie showed up. She brought up Natalie in conversation and accidentally revealed that Natalie had once dated a notorious playboy, a guy known all over school for being a jerk. Travis was stunned and asked Natalie later that he thought she only had 2 boyfriends before, demanding to know what's the deal with the notorious playboy. Natalie brushed it off, saying the playboy was a mistake, not worth mentioning. The two argued, and their relationship fell apart. Natalie noticed Jackie watching from a distance and immediately realized that Jackie must have been the one who spilled the beans about the playboy. On the other side, with Van in critical condition, the southbound group had no choice but to abandon their mission and head back. Taisa sent the others ahead to the cabin to gather help. By the time they reached the cabin, it was already evening. The entire group mobilized and set out to find Taisa and Van in the forest. Once they returned to the cabin, a girl stitched Van's wounds, much to Misty's frustration. She thought she should be the one to do the surgery. Shauna pulled Misty aside, telling her she would probably amputate her leg. Later, Taisa, overwhelmed with guilt, admitted that she'd fallen asleep during her watch. She also revealed that she had a history of sleepwalking. She explained she must have been sleepwalking again, and that's probably how she ended up on that tree branch. It now made sense. Lottie's earlier sighting of Taisa eating dirt hadn't been a hallucination after all. Taisa really had been sleepwalking. The next morning, Laura woke everyone by banging on a drum, announcing that she would fly that plane out of here. She had already checked the plane's fuel tank, which was full. Laura claimed that her grandfather used to fly planes, and she had recently studied the manual. She said if they stay here, they would die, and Van's stitched wound could still get infected. Jackie agreed, adding Shauna needed medical help too. Pressured, Shauna had no choice but to admit her pregnancy. For safety reasons, the assistant coach tried to stop Laura from flying. Laura retorted him, mentioning that his only one leg wouldn't stop her. The group quickly cleared a makeshift runway. Laura placed her teddy bear in the co-pilot's seat, revved the engine, and stomped on the accelerator. With a roar, the plane took off down the runway. Cheers erupted as the plane soared through the air until the teddy bear caught fire suddenly. Within moments, smoke filled the entire cockpit. Realizing she was about to die, Laura closed her eyes as the plane exploded into a fireball. It was a hopeless blaze. With winter fast approaching, the animals began preparing to hibernate, and the group had no choice but to dig up fat white grubs to eat. Surprisingly, once cooked, the grubs smelled amazing. Around this time, a sidekick girl brought out some homemade berry wine, suggesting if they can't stomach the grubs, try washing them down with her wine. Jackie had another idea, proposing they throw a party since they had got wine. Tomorrow's the full moon, which also makes it homecoming. It's perfect timing. They are probably going to die anyway, so why not call it an end-of-the-world party? Everyone jumped on board with the idea. Misty invited the assistant coach to be her dance partner. The coach, not wanting Misty to be heartbroken when he died, reluctantly agreed. Misty went to her secret stash and took out the hallucinogenic mushrooms she had collected earlier. She decided to give the assistant coach a hefty dose. Meanwhile, Jackie told Shauna she didn't want to die a virgin, so tonight she would go to sleep with Travis. Shauna was stunned, asking what about Natalie. Jackie shrugged, saying that they already broke up. She then turned to ask if Shauna had feelings for Travis because she didn't want to fight her for the same guy, her words dripping with hidden meaning. Tysa prepared 2 masks, giving one to Van, which conveniently covered her scarred face. Shauna's pregnancy was becoming more obvious, and she couldn't zip up the back of her dress. She called down asking if someone could help her with her zipper. Misty left the mushrooms on the table and went upstairs to assist her. When she returned, she discovered that the sidekick girl had tossed the mushrooms into the cooking pot. Misty gave her a look, thinking that since they're already in, they might as well enjoy it. As evening fell, the dance party began. Everyone drank the mushroom soup, except Jackie, who refused to consume such low-grade stuff and dumped hers out. Travis tried to approach Natalie to apologize, but Jackie called him over, insisting he dance with her. Watching from a distance, Natalie felt a surge of jealousy and invited the assistant coach to join her for a walk in the forest. Meanwhile, Jackie led Travis toward the cabin. Shauna could only shake her head in disbelief. This was a disaster waiting to happen. In the forest, Natalie shared her hidden stash of alcohol with the assistant coach. After taking a sip, the assistant coach felt dizzy. He wondered aloud why he couldn't handle his liquor, only to realize that Misty must have drugged him again. Natalie, too, felt the effects kicking in, muttering that Misty might have drugged all of them. Soon, all the girls began experiencing vivid hallucinations. Lottie announced something was coming and they wouldn't be hungry for much longer. In the attic, Jackie tried to seduce Travis with sweet talk. He pushed her heavy body away, saying he still had hormone feelings for Natalie. Jackie scoffed that first times aren't that big a deal. If Shauna can sleep with her boyfriend, why can't she do the same? Love is nonsense, and so is friendship. They're all just empty shells in the middle of nowhere. She asked him if he was in or not. Travis, after a moment of hesitation, decided to take a try. Back in the forest, the drugged-up girls started gossiping about Jackie. Lottie asked where she was. The boy answered Jackie went off with Travis. Lottie declared that's not okay because Travis doesn't belong to her. She rallied the other girls and they made their way to the cabin. Inside the cabin, under the influence of the mushrooms, Travis finally managed to sleep with Jackie, but only lasted for 2 minutes. As the drugged girls reached the cabin, they could hear howling wolves in the distance. Van, in a delirious state, howled along, prompting the others to join in. Fueled by the mushrooms, they stormed into the cabin where they found Travis and Jackie half-dressed. Blood stained Jackie's skirt. Lottie, without hesitation, kissed Travis. Jackie, stunned, glanced at Shauna as if expecting her to intervene. Instead, Shauna kissed Travis too. Lottie said Jackie had taken something that didn't belong to her before locking Jackie away. The drugged girls swarmed Travis, determined to drain him dry. This isn't just a hallucinogen, it's an aphrodisiac. Travis, overwhelmed, had initially hoped to enjoy the experience, but the drug twisted his vision. He saw ghostly faces and felt as if his skin were being ripped off by demons. Desperate, Travis escaped from the cabin. Lottie ordered the girls to chase him, leading them into the woods with Shauna grabbing a knife from the wall. In the forest, the assistant coach suddenly snapped out of his stupor. He urged Natalie to go after Travis and tell him how she felt before Jackie took him from her. Just as Natalie left, Misty appeared and threw herself at the assistant coach, pinning him down. He shouted that he was gay, pushing her heavy body away. Natalie returned to the cabin and unlocked the door where Jackie had been confined. She asked what happened, but Jackie ignored her, storming out of the room. Meanwhile, the crazed girls had caught up to Travis and tied him up, ready for a hormone torture. Lottie, now wearing a crown made from antlers, turned to Shauna and whispered that she knew what to do. Shauna raised the knife, and in her eyes, Travis morphed into a deer, ready for slaughter. Lottie coaxed her, saying it wanted them to do this. Just as Shauna was about to strike, Jackie and Natalie arrived, stopping her in time. Shauna snapped back to her senses, though Lottie continued muttering that it lives within all of them, but no one knew what she meant. The next morning, the group gradually regained clarity, though the events of the previous night lingered hazily in their minds. The assistant coach explained the hallucinogenic mushrooms, and the truth dawned on everyone. As they argued, a roar echoed through the forest. A bear lumbered into view. Lottie advised to stay calm, taking the knife from Shauna. Slowly, she approached the bear. To everyone's amazement, the bear knelt before her as if offering itself. Without hesitation, Lottie drove the knife into its heart. It seems that this is what she meant when she said something was coming and they wouldn't be hungry. The group began preparing skewers, planning to grill the bear meat. Before meals, Laura used to lead them in prayer. Even though Laura was gone, Van insisted they continue the tradition, thanking God for providing the bear. Everyone said their thanks, except Jackie. Misty couldn't resist and asked why she didn't express her thanks. Jackie snapped, challenging them if they were seriously not going to talk about what happened last night. They were howling at the moon, dancing like lunatics, and now they're all mad at her for not saying thank you. She then pointed at Shauna, saying she almost killed Travis. Shauna, furious, started yelling back that if she hadn't taken Travis away, none of this would have happened. Their argument escalated and the two of them completely fell out. In the heat of the argument, Jackie blurted out Shauna's secret, that she had been sleeping with her boyfriend, Jeff. The entire group froze, silently watching the two friends tear each other apart. It turned out that Shauna had always lived in Jackie's shadow, following her lead and doing whatever Jackie wanted. Jackie was the queen, while Shauna was nothing more than her servant. Furious, Jackie grabbed her bedding and stormed outside to sleep alone. Meanwhile, since his brother was missing, Travis spent the entire day searching the woods but found no sign of his brother. At one point, he ran into Natalie, who offered to help, but Travis refused her help, tears in his eyes. He confessed he did a lot of terrible things last night. With that, the two reconciled. That night, Jackie sat by a fire she had built outside, feeling lonely. Taysa encouraged Shauna to go talk to her, but Shauna refused and went to bed instead. However, sometime later, Shauna got up, went outside, and apologized to Jackie that she was being childish. Jackie followed Shauna back to the cabin where everyone was awake, standing in a line and smiling warmly. Lottie handed Jackie a cup of hot chocolate, telling her to warm herself up. Jackie took a sip and immediately sensed that something was off, asking how she even had hot chocolate. Everyone kept saying how much they loved Jackie, but the atmosphere felt strange. Then, suddenly, Laura appeared before her. Jackie, stunned, whispered she was supposed to be dead. A shadowy figure next to Laura said they had been waiting for her. It was the head coach, the one who had supposedly died earlier. Shauna jolted awake, realizing it had all been a dream, bone dry and not wet. She hadn't left the cabin after all. When she woke up, she noticed that the temperature had dropped significantly. She could see her breath in the cold air. Looking out the window, she saw a blanket of white. The first snow had fallen. Shauna rushed outside to find Jackie, but it was too late. Jackie had frozen into a solid block of ice. All Shauna could feel in that moment was overwhelming regret. The scene shifted to Lottie, who placed the bear's heart into a ceremonial altar she had built. Behind her, Van and Misty knelt on the ground as Lottie chanted that the darkness would set them free. And with that, the storyline set in 1996 came to an end. The next chapter would tell the story of the survivors in 2021. They were eventually rescued, but the past was far from over. As the scene closed, a mysterious figure suddenly emerged, demanding hush money from the survivors. Slowly, the secrets from 25 years ago began to resurface, piece by piece. The scene shifts to the year 2021, when a journalist has been investigating the story of the soccer team stranded in the wilderness. She managed to track down Allie, the team member who injured her leg and thus luckily missed the plane crash, along with the principal and some teachers. However, none of them know the full details. After all, only the survivors truly understand what happened, and they've all agreed not to talk about it. One of the survivors, Shauna, has grown up now. While inspecting her garden, she immediately notices that some leaves had been gnawed by rabbits, a skill honed from her survival days. Just then, the journalist arrives. The moment Shauna realizes she's a reporter, she slams the door in her face. But when the mention of a big payout comes up, she invites her in and spins a story about how they survived for 19 months in the woods after the plane crash. She finishes the story, takes the money, and the journalist is left unsatisfied, saying she wants something deeper. She offers her a 7-figure sum for a more detailed account. Shauna, however, throws her out and doesn't look back. The journalist leaves a business card behind anyway, undeterred. While ironing some clothes, Shauna notices that Taysa is on TV. Turns out she's running for governor. By 2021, Taysa has married a woman, and the two have adopted a mischievous son and own a dog. It looks like a picture-perfect life. Meanwhile, Shauna has a family of her own, with a daughter named Callie, and she married Jeff, her high school sweetheart. It's revealed that Shauna was pregnant with Jeff's child while they were stranded, but it seems the child didn't survive, as their daughter Callie is still in high school. Shauna has a safe hidden in her wardrobe where she keeps the journal she wrote while in the woods. She pulls out her phone from the safe and arranges a meeting with Taysa. She tells Taysa about the journalist, and together they look into her background. It turns out the journalist doesn't actually work at the publication she claims to. Taisa is nonchalant, saying that they've dealt with snooping journalists before, but Shauna insists that no one can ever learn the truth, or they'll all be doomed. After returning home, Shauna finds a rabbit in her yard and, with a swift motion, kills it with a shovel. The scene shifts to Natalie, who's attending a group therapy session at a rehab facility. As she walks, memories from the woods come flooding back. A terrifying moment where a naked corpse was dragged up a tree and stabbed in the neck to bleed out. Of course, at this point in the 1996 timeline, we don't yet know who the victim is. After group therapy, Natalie treks back to her rented storage unit, which contains a car and a familiar gun in the trunk. The bald storage manager is surprised to finally meet her, commenting that he thought she might have been dead. Natalie is once again haunted by memories of the woods, where Lottie, the Antler Queen, commanded her followers to feast on a fresh plate of meat. We now know with a high degree of certainty that Lottie is the Antler Queen. One of the masked figures is the medical girl, Misty. In 2021, Misty works as a caregiver at a nursing home, still living the life of a caregiver. She knows exactly how to deal with the difficult elderly residents. After her shift, she invites a date over to her house. When she turns on the lights, she's stunned to see Natalie sitting there, holding a gun. Her date immediately flees. Natalie, after all these years, has come looking for answers. She reveals that someone sent her a postcard with a drawing of the woods crash site and a hook-foot figure. Natalie suspects Misty sent it, but Misty pulls out an identical postcard she received just a week earlier, mailed through an anonymous online service. They both realize the postmarks are useless for tracking. Misty shares her own findings, mentioning that a journalist has already contacted her too. Whoever sent the postcards knows about the hook-foot symbol, which means they must be one of the survivors. She also brings up the whereabouts of Travis, who disappeared after returning, hiding his identity. Yet Misty managed to track him down. While talking, Kevin came by. He's the boy who had a crush on Natalie, and Natalie brought him to her house when they were kids. Back then, her dad suddenly walked in to disrupt their intimate moment. Now, after all these years, their feelings remain the same. Kevin handed Natalie a business card. He's a cop now. He said it's been 20 years and told her to call him if she ever wanted to talk about some hormone thing. The next day, while Shauna was driving, she called her daughter Callie, asking her to take the beef out of the freezer to defrost for school the next day. Shauna planned to cook braised beef, but Callie wasn't sure which one was the beef. Shauna patiently explained, and while doing so, she rear-ended the car in front of her. Immediately getting out of the car, Shauna went on the offensive, yelling at the driver. The driver, Adam, was stunned and said it's her who rear-ended him. But Shauna didn't care. She just blamed Adam. Adam took a look and then wrote his number on Shauna's arm, telling her to find his mechanic friend for a fix. Shauna wrote her number on Adam's arm as well and drove to meet her husband, Jeff, at their marriage counselor's office. The two had been going through a rough patch recently. Jeff had been swamped with work, running his furniture store and dealing with constant database issues. The counselor said marriage is born from love and dies without intimacy. It was clear that the two hadn't been physically close in a while. The counselor gave them some homework, create some fantasies, and try to reignite that spark. So that night, they decided to give it a try. Shauna pretended to be a customer buying furniture, staging an unexpected fling. But mid-role-play, Jeff noticed the phone number on Shauna's arm. She had to explain the car accident, and Jeff got upset, saying she didn't even tell him about the accident. The two ended up arguing, and the night ended poorly. Meanwhile, Taisa also received a mysterious postcard, but didn't mention it to her family. She was playing shadow puppets with her adopted son when she suddenly experienced a hallucination. When she opened the curtains, she noticed that her son had plastered eerie drawings all over the window. The boy explained that he did it because every night, a scary lady stares at him from the trees. Adam later called Shauna, asking why she hadn't gone to the mechanic for a car fix yet. Shauna admitted she didn't have the money. Adam asked if she would go if it were free. It turned out that Adam wasn't referring to a friend's shop. He owned the garage himself and was clearly interested in Shauna. After hanging up, Shauna was left staring at the frozen beef Callie had forgotten to take out. Looking out the window, she saw yet another rabbit munching on her vegetables. Expertly, she grabbed a knife and butchered the rabbit, as if she'd been doing it for years. That night, the family feasted on the rabbit, and Shauna proudly announced she caught the rabbit in the yard. During dinner, Shauna asked Jeff if he had any king-sized beds in stock. Jeff immediately recognized her flirtation, and that night, the two rekindled their romance. While Jeff was in the bathroom, Shauna glanced at his phone and saw a message from someone arranging their meeting at 4 p.m. tomorrow. This confirmed her suspicions. Jeff was cheating on her. That night, Natalie was thinking of Travis and decided to give him a call, but there was no answer. The next day, Natalie resolved to drive out and find him. As soon as she got in her car, Misty pulled up in her own vehicle, having seemingly anticipated that Natalie would go searching for Travis. Natalie's car wouldn't start for some strange reason, so the two decided to take Misty's car instead. On the road, Misty talked non-stop for 3 hours until they finally arrived at Travis's place. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Natalie picked the lock, and the two began searching inside. Misty found Travis's paychecks, which were surprisingly low, but the stubs showed his workplace, somewhere at a farm. Natalie also found an expensive bottle of whiskey worth over $2,000 and wondered how Travis could afford it. As they were searching, the police arrived and arrested them for breaking and entering. At the police station, Natalie called Taisa for help. Taisa said she had paid for Natalie's rehab, but why she's been out for only 3 days and already gotten arrested again. Natalie explained the situation, but Taisa advised her to let it go. She suspected Travis had gone off the grid for a reason and told Natalie to stop chasing him. Taisa didn't help bail Natalie out, but Misty managed to get them both released. Natalie asked who she had called, and it turned out to be Kevin. Of course, Kevin was a cop now, so why hadn't they thought of that? The two decided to head to the farm to look for Travis. Meanwhile, Shauna told Jeff that she needed to take her car to the mechanic the next afternoon and asked him to come with her. Jeff, however, declined, using the excuse that his database issue still wasn't resolved. In the afternoon, instead of going to get her car fixed, Shauna went to the furniture store to spy on her husband. She watched as Jeff drove off with a gift box in hand, so she decided to follow him. Jeff went to a hotel in the middle of the day. When Shauna got to the front desk, she tried to ask for Jeff's room number, but the staff wouldn't tell her. Shauna pretended to be an investigator, but couldn't provide any proof. Luckily, Adam showed up just in time to ease the awkward situation. Shauna asked what he was doing there, and it turned out Adam's auto repair shop was nearby, and he often came there for drinks. Adam invited Shauna for a few drinks and possibly some hormone therapy, and as she turned around, she spotted Jeff leaving the hotel with a woman, likely the woman he dated with. Adam quickly figured it out and asked Shauna if she wanted to get back at her husband. The two of them then booked a room. That night, Taisa thought she heard something while trying to sleep. Following the sound to the laundry room, she stepped on her son's dismembered doll's eyeball on the staircase. When she reached the laundry room, she saw the doll had been torn apart. Meanwhile, Natalie and Misty arrived at the farm late at night. As soon as they entered, Natalie burst into tears. Travis had hanged himself in the barn. Misty, seeing this, pulled Natalie away, knowing that if they were caught, they wouldn't be able to explain. On the way back, Misty pulled out a piece of paper they had found in Travis's room. The markings on the paper suggested Natalie was right about something, but she couldn't quite remember what. However, she was convinced Travis hadn't killed himself. He had been murdered. Upon returning, Natalie met with Kevin, hoping he would help investigate Travis's death. Misty, on the other hand, was lurking in the background, spying on everything. While watching, Misty saw the journalist and immediately called Natalie. Natalie glanced at her phone and hung up on Misty. Just as she was about to leave, Kevin noticed Misty outside and confronted her, asking if she was stalking him. Misty denied it, saying she was covering for him instead. Natalie wasn't pleased and stormed off. Misty then approached the journalist, revealing that she knew the journalist was watching her and telling the journalist not to push her even though she might seem harmless. After a wild night together, Shauna and Adam went completely off the rails. They even decided to jump off a bridge into deep water. Just as they were undressing, they heard a voice warning them that someone would get hurt. When they turned around, it was Jackie's voice. How was she appearing as a hallucination? Shauna ignored it and jumped into the water. Shauna returned home that night, only to receive a call from Misty informing her that Travis was dead. Shauna was stunned and immediately hung up the phone, feeling an uneasy sense of dread. The story continues after someone sends threatening postcards to the survivors, and Travis is found hanged under mysterious circumstances. The next day was Halloween, and Callie wanted to spend the night in town with her friends. She was adamant, giving her mother no room to argue. Jeff reassured Shauna, saying, "It's fine." Then he asked Shauna if she had any plans for the evening. Shauna mentioned a book club meeting, and when Jeff suggested going with her, she quickly refused, telling him not to come since it's all women. Jeff had no choice but to drop the idea. Meanwhile, the cop Kevin was investigating Travis's death but found no evidence of foul play. Everything pointed to suicide. Natalie still didn't believe it and called Misty, urging her to dig up something. On the other side of town, Taisa's dog suddenly started barking wildly. When Taisa looked out the window, she saw a snow wolf. Grabbing a pair of scissors, she rushed outside barefoot, but when she got there, nothing was to be seen. Upon returning, Taisa noticed someone had spray-painted the word "spill" on her door. That night, Taisa received a campaign letter from her competitor. Taisa's partner was furious, asking if she might have really leaked something. She even suggested that since the competitor's daughter was a drug addict, she could use that against him. Taisa didn't want to resort to such tactics, finding them too underhanded and not her style. While helping her son put away clothes, she noticed red paint stains on the floor and found a paint can under his bed, suggesting that her son might be the one who spray-painted "spill" outside. Natalie and Misty found a hacker online who could help them steal confidential information. They met in a forum for private detectives. The hacker, upon learning they were after police data, agreed to meet in person to discuss terms of the exchange. After filling up some gas cans, they drove all night to meet the hacker. He had no other requests but demanded to join their operation, claiming he had uncovered more details about Travis that he wouldn't share unless they let him in. Misty poured gasoline on the hacker's pants, and Natalie pulled out a lighter, threatening him to cooperate, or she would roast his smelly sausage. The hacker had no choice but to hand over the information. Meanwhile, Adam invited Shauna out to a club for some fun. While dancing their hormones away, Shauna once again saw Jackie's ghost, standing there and staring at her. A moment later, the figure turned and left. Shauna ran after her only to realize it was her daughter, Callie. It was an awkward encounter as mother and daughter ran into each other at the club. Callie had dug out her mother's old soccer uniform and was wearing it as her costume. While Shauna was scolding her daughter, Adam suddenly appeared, exposing Shauna's affair in front of Callie. Shauna pulled her daughter aside, but Callie cheekily remarked her mother's lover was pretty hot. There's no way her mother could have snagged this guy at her greasy body. She deduced that her mother must have told him about her survival story with the YellowJackets. Shauna paused to think. She hadn't, but she had mentioned her real name, realizing that he probably figured out that she was one of the survivors online. Callie understood the emotional baggage between her parents, which mostly stemmed from Jackie. Shauna confessed that uniform she's wearing was not hers, but Jackie's. Jackie's parents gave it to her on the 40th anniversary of her death as a memory, and ever since then, she had lived her whole life thinking about her. When Jackie was alive, she lived in her shadow, and even now that she's gone, she still lives in her shadow. Callie listened sympathetically to her mother's confession. The next day, Taisa took out the paint can and confronted her son, asking if he sprayed those words outside. Her son denied it, claiming it was the scary lady from the trees. Taisa, of course, didn't believe him, thinking he was lying. Frustrated, her son angrily knocked all the candy off the table and stormed out. The incident left Taisa feeling unsettled, and after some deep thought, she made the decision to drop out of the election, choosing to prioritize her family instead. Misty and Natalie printed out the case files, which mostly included the crime scene investigation and autopsy reports. While looking through the pictures, Misty noticed traces of what appeared to be wax. Using a pen, Misty connected the wax spots, and shockingly, the pattern formed the hook-foot figure symbol. Natalie concluded that Travis didn't set it up. He wasn't the type to do something like that. They wondered if someone was performing some sort of ritual while Travis was hanging. Taisa stood before the media. Initially, she planned to announce her withdrawal from the election, but as the flash of cameras and lights overwhelmed her, she started to hallucinate again. She thought she saw the word "spill" in her speech notes. After pulling herself together, she made a sudden decision to fight back. Unveiling a large banner, she said someone spray-painted her door yesterday. No matter what they wrote, she was staying in this race. If they stay united, nothing can defeat them. Meanwhile, Callie pulled out her trump card, telling her mom not to interfere with her personal life, or she would tell Dad her mom had got a sexy boyfriend. Shauna gave Callie a reality check, saying after they divorce, her dad might find her a stepmom her age. Recently divorced men get lonely. They'll want her to watch Daniel CC series with them every night. Hearing that, Callie was so freaked out, she promised not to tell her dad. After Callie left for school, Shauna searched her own name online, and to her surprise, she found something, indicating that Adam might be only interested in her greasy body because of her past. Later, Natalie showed Taisa the hook-foot figure engraving they'd found on the barn floor, insisting that Travis didn't end his own life. At that moment, Taisa received an anonymous text telling her to gather $50,000 in cash, wait for further instructions, and not to tell anyone. It was probably the same person who had sent the postcards. It seemed like this was all just about money. Taisa immediately called Shauna. Cut to Misty, who was watching everything through hidden cameras she had secretly installed in Natalie's house. When Shauna arrived at Natalie's place, someone greeted her. It was a grown-up Randy, Jeff's best friend from high school. Randy was going through a divorce, still as immature as ever, and proudly showed off his YellowJackets tattoo, claiming to be Shauna's biggest fan. Shauna made up an excuse about a book club and quickly left, heading to Natalie's. When she saw Travis's body there, she felt a pang of sadness, and upon seeing the postcard, she gasped. Oddly, though, Shauna herself had never received a threatening postcard. After some discussion, the three women decided to give the blackmailer the money they asked for, but place a GPS tracker in the cache to follow them. However, $50,000 was no small amount, and Taisa was the only one with enough resources to gather it. The next day, Shauna was lost in thought when Jeff snapped her out of it, reminding her that today was Jackie's birthday, and as they did every year, they were going to visit her parents. Jackie's parents were always kind to Shauna, and this time they gave her a rabbit figurine, assuming that Shauna loved rabbits because her house was full of rabbit-themed items. Little did they know that Shauna's real obsession was killing rabbits. The parents told Shauna that Jackie was such a generous person. If she knew Shauna ended up with Jeff, she would have supported her, and Jeff really suits her better. The comment left Shauna feeling uneasy. Meanwhile, Adam kept bombarding Shauna with text messages. Needing a moment of peace, Shauna made an excuse to escape to the bathroom. After leaving the bathroom, Shauna went to Jackie's old room, which had been kept exactly the same. She casually flipped through Jackie's journal and recalled memories of the two of them playing in that room. As she continued flipping through the journal, she found a photo of Jackie and Jeff together. At that moment, Shauna experienced a hallucination. She saw Jackie sitting on the bed, accusing her that it's all her fault. Jeff came in and told her not to leave him alone out there with them. Shauna handed him the photo, and Jeff, noticing her discomfort, offered to leave if she wanted. However, Shauna insisted on staying for dinner. During the meal, Jackie's mom continuously praised Jackie and kept comparing Shauna to her. Jeff finally had enough and said his wife got into Brown University. She's the smartest person he had ever met. On the drive home, Jeff reassured Shauna, saying he knew they didn't start out in the best way, but they were just kids back then, and he had no regrets. Shauna's emotions were mixed. Meanwhile, Taisa's partner had taken their son to a psychologist. While the psychologist was explaining things, Taisa's phone kept buzzing non-stop, which frustrated her partner. On the way back, the two discussed the psychologist's words. The doctor said that their son's behavior stemmed from significant pressure, but where was this pressure coming from? Taisa dismissively replied that psychologists were all frauds, just out to make money with their fake advice. Her partner was upset and snapped back. They started arguing so intensely that they almost hit someone. The argument was affecting their ability to pull together the $50,000. Taisa had no choice but to call Natalie and confess her partner was messing things up and she couldn't pull out the money. In anger, Natalie stormed out, sold her car, and had Kevin drive her back. Kevin, on the way to pick up his son, mentioned that he was divorced, and his ex-wife couldn't make it to their son's soccer game that day due to work, so he had to step in. At halftime, Natalie gave the boy a few tips, pointing out a weakness in the defense. Suddenly, Natalie was flooded with memories from her past. Kevin grabbed her hand and told her that he didn't care about her history with addiction. He wanted to be with her. Natalie then brought Kevin back to her place, where she received a threatening message telling her to deliver the $50,000 to a donation box by 2 a.m. Meanwhile, Misty had concocted a secret weapon using contraband drugs from the nursing home and called the journalist to set up a meeting. As soon as the journalist got into the car, Misty injected her with a sedative and locked her in the basement. Shauna, on the other hand, had been ignoring Adam's texts all day. Jeff approached her, asking if she was still going to the book club tonight. When Shauna looked at him, she noticed that the inventory database had crashed again, so Jeff quickly left to deal with it. Shauna, feeling abandoned, sent a cheeky reply to Adam, telling him to clean himself up quickly since she's coming over. Cut to Taisa. She was standing under a tree chewing on some dirt. She even bit her own arm, savoring the taste, but was jolted back to reality by a text from Natalie, signaling that it was time to act. Taisa quickly cleaned herself up and met with the others. Shauna arrived too, bringing the GPS tracker she had prepared in advance. To avoid the GPS being discovered, they packed the bag with some random items and hid the tracker inside a ramen noodle packet. Natalie thought it was a clever plan, thinking no one would find the GPS in there. After placing the bag at the designated drop point, the trio decided to kill some time by drinking a bottle of wine they bought from a convenience store. Soon enough, they were tipsy and realized it was already past 3 a.m., but the blackmailer still hadn't shown up. Meanwhile, Misty hadn't slept either. She was watching the security cameras but had no idea where Natalie had gone. The only person sleeping soundly in bed was Kevin, snoring away like a pig. Suddenly, the GPS tracker moved. The three women, still dizzy from the wine, realized they couldn't drive, so they decided to walk to the location. When they arrived, they spotted someone throwing the bag into a car. Natalie rushed over and held the person at gunpoint, only to discover he was just an employee collecting the donation boxes. Suddenly, someone took the bag and started running. The three split up and began chasing. During the pursuit, the blackmailer ran into a pile of glitter, covering himself in it. He managed to escape by car, and Natalie raised her gun to shoot, but Taisa quickly stopped her. The bullet missed, and the blackmailer got away, even throwing out the GPS. Now they had lost track of him, and their only clue was the glitter covering him. Meanwhile, Misty was interrogating the journalist. The journalist claimed that she was sent by Taisa to monitor the group and make sure nothing they said affected her election campaign. She even tried to recruit Misty, suggesting they investigate Travis's death together. Misty responded with a hard slap across the face. After a long night, Shauna returned home to find Adam waiting at her door. She accused him of his reckless behavior, saying what if her husband or daughter came home? Shauna's daughter was spending the night at a neighbor's, so the house was empty. Adam professed his love, and Shauna finally gave in, pulling him inside where they spent the night together. Meanwhile, Natalie put Kevin's gun back in its holster. It turns out it was his service weapon. The journalist revealed another piece of information. Travis's bank account had been closed after his death, meaning it wasn't just suicide. Someone had taken his money. The next morning, Shauna woke up to the sound of the door opening. It was Jeff coming home. She urged Adam to jump out the window, but then she realized there was a wire fence, so she shoved him into the wardrobe. Jeff, groggy, entered the room, and when he moved to put his clothes in the wardrobe, Shauna stopped him, telling him to just throw them in the laundry basket. She would wash them later. Jeff complied and went to take a shower. As the sound of water filled the room, Adam quietly dressed and slipped out, leaving no hormone traces behind. Meanwhile, Kevin realized that one bullet was missing from his gun. Natalie claimed she had been playing with it on a park bench and accidentally fired it into the ground. Kevin, however, was insistent that all bullets must be accounted for. Unable to explain, Natalie frustrated him to the point where he stormed off. By now, it's clear that the journalist couldn't be the blackmailer since she had been locked up by Misty all night. Still, it was clear she was being manipulated by someone. Was it really Taisa, as she suggested? After Adam slipped away from Jeff's home, Callie found Jeff's ID badge near the couch. She was surprised to realize that her mother had brought her fling into the house. She then searched for Adam's identity online but found nothing. She said everyone had some social media presence these days, but this Adam guy had nothing. So she warned her mom that maybe Adam was just trying to use her wilderness survival story to con her. Shauna, unsettled by her daughter's words, called the school Adam supposedly graduated from, but they had no record of him. Later, Jeff gave Shauna a sexy slip dress as a gift for their upcoming wedding anniversary, but Shauna looked at it and thought this was definitely not her style. Misty, back at home, was interrogating the journalist while watching her surveillance cameras. Suddenly, she noticed that Natalie had bought drugs. Furious, Misty stormed over, snatched the drugs from Natalie, and threw them on the floor. Amid the chaos, Natalie also realized that Misty had secretly installed surveillance in her house. Natalie confronted her if she had been watching her and Kevin in bed. Misty's excuse was that friends should look out for each other, but Natalie was having none of it. Feeling unappreciated, Misty slammed the door and left in anger. That evening, while Shauna and her family were having dinner, the doorbell rang. Both Shauna and Callie froze, wondering if it was Adam again. But it turned out to be Taisa. The two of them awkwardly pretended they hadn't seen each other in 20 years and exchanged small talk. It turned out that Taisa's sleepwalking had returned. Her son had seen a scary lady in the trees outside, and now it was clear that the figure was the sleepwalking Taisa herself. Even her dog had gone missing, and Taisa was worried that she might have eaten the dog. She hadn't slept for 3 days and was afraid to sleep alone, so she asked if she could stay with Shauna, just like they had back in the attic during their time in the wilderness. Shauna, of course, agreed. They chatted for a long time in bed, with Shauna mentioning Adam but not bringing up the fact that he might be the blackmailer. When Misty returned to the basement, she found the journalist holding one of her pet birds, threatening to break its neck if she wasn't released. Misty calmly told her to go ahead and she would just buy another one. She then proceeded to pummel the journalist. Eventually, the journalist let the bird go and Misty chased after it. When Misty returned, she untied the journalist and broke down in tears, asking why she tried to be a good friend, but no one ever appreciated it. The next day, Shauna confronted Adam for his identity, since she couldn't find any records of him at his school. Adam admitted that he only graduated from high school, but he lied about going to college because he wanted to make a good impression. His ex-girlfriend went there, so he used her story. Shauna then asked him about his high school experiences, and Adam provided detailed answers, even swearing that the only lie was about college. Everything else, including his love for her, was true. Natalie, learning from Misty that Travis's bank account had been closed after his death, sought out her old friend who worked at the bank. The two had a history of drug use together, so the friend agreed to help out of fear that Natalie might expose her past. Natalie told her that she believed Travis hadn't killed himself because they had made a mutual promise back in the wilderness. No matter how dire things got, neither would ever take their own life. Travis had always been a man of his word, so Natalie was convinced he hadn't killed himself. Afterward, Taissa told her partner about the sleepwalking, suggesting that they move away for a while for their son's sake. Her partner agreed. While Shauna was tidying up her wardrobe, she noticed glitter on the floor, the same glitter the blackmailer had knocked over while escaping. That same morning, Shauna remembered that Adam had been in the wardrobe before. She broke out in a cold sweat and rushed to her safe, only to find that her journal was missing. Enraged, she stormed over to Adam's place. She tore through his things, ignoring his protests. Adam pleaded, saying how he could know her safe's combination. Shauna coldly replied, "The combination is the flight number of the crash, and Adam could have looked it up." In one of Adam's drawers, Shauna found a book he had been writing about their story. Adam tried to explain, saying he just wanted to learn more about her experience, but Shauna grabbed a knife and stabbed him, killing him on the spot. At this point, we can conclude that Adam was not the blackmailer, as there are many clues pointing toward the real culprit. First, Adam and Shauna met because of a fender bender, a rare event that if it had not happened, none of this would have occurred. This alone rules out Adam as the blackmailer. Second, every known survivor received a postcard except for Shauna. The postcards featured the Hookfoot figure, which only someone involved in the wilderness events or someone who had access to Shauna's journal would know about. Third, the glitter was found in Shauna's wardrobe, linking the blackmailer directly to her. The real blackmailer turned out to be Shauna's husband, Jeff. When Shauna got home, she noticed that her journal had been returned, so she confronted Jeff. Jeff admitted everything right away, saying he never intended to drag her into this, but things spiraled out of control. It turned out that Jeff's business had recently hit a crisis. An online homeware competitor was trying to bankrupt him, and Jeff had resorted to borrowing money from loan sharks, which left him in a financial disaster. With no other options, he thought of extorting Taissa and the others for money. After all, Taissa was about to become governor, and $50,000 was nothing to her. Shauna asked if those loan sharks would kill them, and if they should kill those loan sharks first. Jeff responded, "No need for that, because he had already paid them off. No one's going to die." Shauna said, "It's too late for that. Someone's already dead." She then told Jeff everything about her affair with Adam and explained why she did it, saying he cheated on her too with that woman. Jeff was dumbfounded, saying he only went to the hotel to pay off a debt, and that woman was just the one who lent him the money. He further confessed that it wasn't just himself involved. He had also pulled Randy into the scheme, as Randy was his best childhood friend. Shauna hadn't told Jeff about anything related to the wilderness, but Jeff had opened the safe himself and found out everything. The two quickly came up with a plan. Since Shauna suspected Adam was the blackmailer previously, Jeff suggested they make Adam the scapegoat. Regarding Shauna's affair, Jeff was surprisingly forgiving, and the two teamed up to act. Afterward, Shauna called Natalie and Taissa to the scene of Adam's body, saying Adam was the blackmailer, and he attacked her, so she killed him. Natalie didn't care that someone had died. She was more concerned about the missing money, saying her money was still nowhere to be found, and that their friend Travis was killed by this guy. Taissa chimed in, saying her journal was a ticking time bomb. They debated what to do with Adam's body. Natalie pointed out Adam's place was now full of Shauna's DNA, and the police would definitely trace it back to her. She suggested bringing in Misty, who had expertise in disposing of bodies. Natalie immediately sought out Misty, who was thrilled at the chance to help. Her professional demeanor kicked in as soon as she heard the situation. Misty went to the nursing home first to steal some supplies, then arrived at Adam's apartment. After checking Adam's phone and surveillance, only one problem remained. Who would be the best at disposing of the body? Shauna, of course. The group quickly divided up the task. Shauna and Natalie would deal with the body, while Taissa and Misty cleaned up the scene. Shauna placed the body in the bathtub and without hesitation picked up a chainsaw. In no time, she began dismembering Adam's body, not blinking an eye. Meanwhile, Natalie chatted with her about Travis, and Shauna suddenly remembered that Adam had been with her the entire time Travis was killed. This meant the real killer was still out there. Before long, Adam's body was chopped into pieces. The scene shifts to Jeff, who was attending a high school reunion. Randy was nervous, saying what if they slip up when they arrive. Just then, Allie, the woman who had injured her leg and missed the plane crash, walked over. She asked if Shauna would be attending. Jeff replied she would definitely be here. Meanwhile, Misty arrived at the nursing home, mourning over an elderly resident who had just passed away, delivering a heartfelt condolence speech to the family. Adam's head was burnt to nothing, and after the group finished dealing with everything, they all went home, each crying for different reasons. After cleaning up a bit, they all gathered again at the high school reunion. As expected, the atmosphere people carry is often proportional to what they've done. Randy approached Shauna to greet her, but she warned him if he told anyone what they did, he would die without a trace. Suddenly, Allie took the mic and started talking. Naturally, the topic included the soccer team and the plane crash. A memorial video was shown, and it left everyone feeling awkward, especially Shauna when Jackie's picture appeared. Shauna cursed silently. To her surprise, Allie asked Jeff and Shauna to lead the dance. While dancing in TikTok style, Jeff asked Shauna if she had taken care of everything. Shauna replied it's handled and urged him not to ask more. Misty returned home and told the journalist about the reunion before deciding to let her go, as the journalist wasn't the blackmailer. When the journalist reached into her pocket, she asked where her life-saving cigarette was. Misty told her to quit her smoking since it's bad for her. The journalist insisted, so Misty reluctantly pulled the cigarette out of the trash and handed it back. The journalist got into her car, eagerly lit it, and drove off. A few moments later, she started to feel dizzy and faint. It turned out that Misty had tampered with the cigarette. That night, Jeff and Shauna were in high spirits, laughing together while watching TV. When Callie came home and saw them like that, she felt a bit out of place. Jeff invited Callie to sit down, saying it was more fun to watch TV as a family. The TV was showing Tysa's speech. Tysa had prepared for the worst, but to her surprise, she had actually won the election. Then suddenly, news of Adam's disappearance flashed on the screen. Callie looked shocked to realize the dead was her mom's lover. Meanwhile, Tysa's partner had taken their son home to grab some things. While in the laundry room, the partner suddenly felt a strong wind. She followed the breeze and found some bloodstains on the floor. The vent was much larger inside than it appeared, and the walls were lined with horrifying things. There was the head of their dead dog and their son's doll. There were also drawings of the Hookfoot figure on the walls. It was absolutely terrifying with the blackmailer still hidden. At the same time, Natalie had a gun to her chin, ready to pull the trigger when suddenly there was a loud knock at the door. Some people burst in and forcibly took Natalie away. These people had tattoos of the Hookfoot figure on their necks. Just then, the friend tried calling Natalie, but when there was no answer, she left a nervous voicemail saying she had investigated Travis's account and found out who transferred the money, and now she was being hunted. With that, the first season comes to an end. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.